All right, we can go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, we'll have people trickle in, and as they start watching, and others may just watch later. But thanks for tuning in, folks. And for those who don't know me, my name is Sonia LeClaire, and I work under the name The Reluctant Enthusiast. TheReluctantEnthusiast.com is my website, and I do some coaching and writing. And my work revolves around the outdoors and using the outdoors as a springboard to improve our physical and mental health and living our own version of a rich and meaningful life in whatever terms that means for you. And this summer, I've put together a 4-part series on keeping ourselves safe, a summer safety series, because exploring the outdoors, that's one of the most important pieces is getting back in one piece. So the first two, we're on number 3 right now. The first 2 are around self-defense and hiking with dogs. And tonight we're going to be talking about encounters with wildlife. And we'll have one more is to carry or not to carry around personal safety, especially geared towards women, because that's one of the biggest concerns we as women have outdoors is whether or not to carry and how to stay safe. But tonight we're going to be talking about wildlife, and we're fortunate to be joined by Conservation Officer Eric Hannett. If you live in Southwest New Hampshire, he's one of our conservation officers. If you don't live in Southwest New Hampshire, you might know him from Animal Planet's Northwoods Law. So thanks very much, Eric, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
If you want to talk for a moment about a little bit about your background, I know you've been doing this for about 15 years and or maybe even longer. Just before we dive into the bulk of this, and just talk a little bit about your background and some of the projects you have going on right now.
Yeah, so I've been doing this job for about 15 years. That's very, very good. And so I've been in law enforcement for a lot longer, but I've been a conservation officer for 15 years. And I've been in this area, fortunately, for that entire time. And it's been a fun run. It's been a very interesting job. It's been a very interesting career path. I've dealt with all kinds of animals. I've dealt with all kinds of situations. I've been fortunate to deal with things that some people never get the opportunity to experience, and I've been unfortunate to deal with some of the things that people have had not to experience, haven't had to experience. So, yeah, I mean, I've dealt with all kinds of animals, all kinds of situations over the years between search and rescue and just dealing with wildlife, because typically if there's a wildlife issue, if the towns have some sort of an issue or just an issue in general, they call us for the wild stuff. So that's primarily what we do with that. And so, projects, I mean, there's always something going on. There really isn't a slow time of year for us. It's usually pretty busy year round. Right now we're in the process of filming for the show, Northwoods Law, so that keeps us pretty busy. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
Okay, and did you have a background in wildlife ecology, or did you come from a law enforcement background and sort of learn the wildlife along the way?
Yeah, I came from a law enforcement background and military background, and I grew up hunting and fishing, so obviously that was helpful. But learning the job and learning what I needed to learn, how to, hunting and fishing is one thing, dealing with the animals, but dealing with wild animals that are alive and you're trying to keep them alive, that's kind of a different thing. So that's some definite on-the-job training. I mean, most people, there's no real way to kind of prepare for that other than reading books. Mm-hmm. Reading books doesn't tell you how to not be killed by a moose that's charging you.
So did you want to talk about any of your projects coming up, or did you want to say that to the end, or did you?
Yeah, we can say that to the end, sure.
Okay, sure. All right, so one of the first things I wanted to talk about was, in terms of safety, outdoors, and wildlife, was situational awareness. And, a lot of people, when they think about the outdoors, they're thinking about Gaia and Mother Earth and Mother Nature, but, the reality is that nature doesn't care about you one way or another. It doesn't care if you make it home. We get a lot of benefits, but it's a one-way street. And I think that's really important that people remember that it's your responsibility to make it home, that nature is not going out of its way to take care of you or to nurture your way back home. It's your responsibility to make sure you stay safe to the greatest extent possible. And one of the ways that you can do that, one of the biggest ways, is just to stay aware of your surroundings as much as possible. And one of the things that I see people do, we've touched on this in, sort of on a criminal sense, when we were talking about self-defense, and we might touch on it again in the to carry or not to carry session, but earbuds are, are a great way to stay totally out of touch with the world around you, and having the ability to hear what's happening around you is really important. Whether it's incoming weather, flash floods, trees falling around you. That doesn't mean that on every hike or every outing in the woods, terrible things are happening and things are falling all around you, but you need to be aware. And often when people get pulled into podcasts or their music, they're also not really paying a lot of attention. They're in the zone and they're not always paying a lot of attention in general because they're paying more attention to what they're listening to. So making sure if you go outdoors, you don't have those earbuds, because from a wildlife perspective, another great reason not to have them is that wildlife will give you audible cues to, once they're stressed or to back off. And Eric, can you talk a little bit about some of those audible cues that you might miss if you're not cued in to what's happening when you're poking along the trails and not paying attention?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I don't understand earbuds, why you'd want to be out in nature and listening to music that you can listen to at home.
That's one problem, but yeah.
If you, I don't use it. I can't even use them in a public place because you don't know what's going on around you. They deaden the sound around you so much that you can't hear just basic stuff. But yeah, wildlife, obviously 99% of the wildlife we have, certainly in this state and most of the world, they really don't want anything to do with you. And for the most part, they want to try to stay away from you as much as possible. And they will give, audible alarms, whether it's a rattlesnake or whether it's a moose or a bear that's huffing at you or something like that. So you may not see them. And if you have those earbuds in, you're definitely not going to hear them. So definitely not a good idea to wear them. Again, I don't understand why you would. But then just, comes down to, like you said, if a tree falls or, if there's something going on or if you're out there and somebody else, this happens to us all the time where someone gets injured and they're hiking out in the woods and they're yelling for help and you're going to walk right past them because you can't hear them. And the same goes for you. So obviously it's not going to hurt you too much if you don't hear somebody, but in the future you might need to yell for help. And if everyone's wearing those, and they're not going to hear you. So yeah, definitely wildlife is, they will very often give you those audible alarms or audible, alerts to say, stay away from me. I don't want you near me. And, you might unknowingly or unwillingly step into that situation. But if you've been wearing or not been wearing earbuds, then that probably wouldn't have happened. So I would strongly discourage that. Obviously, it can't stop you, but it's a good idea.
People do, and someone just did that here locally on Pack. For those who are nearby, someone was just doing it on Pack. I think last fall or last summer. I don't know. You may not have gotten a call about it, but they were wearing earbuds and poking along, just doing their cardio of Pack Monadnock, and then next thing you know, didn't realize there was a bear huffing and stomping.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
Whoops, and he didn't get charged, but he came pretty close.
Absolutely, and especially animals like that, they do. Like bears are very vocal, and they will make all kinds of noises and to let you know to back off and get away from them.
Yeah. So, and you wouldn't have missed it. It's hard to miss, I think.
Yep. Absolutely. if you're in tune, it's very hard to miss.
Yep. So speaking of bears, we're going to get to some animals more specifically. People have specific fears around certain animals that are in the woods at the same time, and bears are also are one of them, obviously, and specifically in this time of year, there's a concern around what to do what if I wanted to run into a mama bear and her cubs, or I just see the cubs. What's your advice when someone runs into that situation?
Well, I mean, certainly if somebody, sees a bear and they're close enough where they can identify that bear, I mean, the best thing to do is just kind of back off and give it space. Typically speaking, if you get into that situation and if you're aware of your surroundings and aware of, what's going on, you're probably going to have an opportunity to kind of just do that, back off and get away from it. There's a situation, I suppose, where, you could stumble onto something where there's cubs or, and hopefully you'll recognize that if there's cubs around, there's probably going to be a mother around. And black bears, they're a wild animal. They can be a very dangerous animal, if they're cornered or when provoked. typically speaking, they're going to run away from you. Typically, our biggest problem we have with black bears is people feeding them when they're not supposed to. Well, they're not supposed to feed them, period, but people feeding them. And so when you start feeding them, you start to habituate them towards people. And some of those bears, though they may not be in an urban setting, they may be in the woods, they may be going from house to house. And now this bear is used to being around people, and now this bear is used to being fed. And they kind of get used to you, and now they think, well, there's a person, and people usually feed me, so I might go and approach them. And so the best thing to do is just kind of, stand your ground, obviously, and then try to back away. Maintain. They're kind of big with, eye keys and kind of movements in that sense. So if you can just kind of keep looking at them, but just back away or just maintain, you're probably not going to have an issue. It's one of those things. Black bears, if you get into a situation where you're being attacked by a black bear, they say that you should try to defend yourself, try to fight. Where a brown bear, you should play dead. So don't play dead with a black bear, because they will continue to do whatever they're doing. So if you do get into that situation, then you got to do what you got to do to defend yourself. But bears are they're one of those things that they really don't want anything to do with people, and they will usually let you know when they're not happy. It's not usually that mistakable when they're angry.
Okay, so if you're walking through the woods and you run into that situation, assuming you didn't stumble and almost walk right into them, probably just need to back off.
Absolutely, and and certainly with anything, depending on where you are, like for example, like Gap Mountain in Troy, there's a lot of blueberries up there on the top, and certainly when they're ripe, and when there's, hopefully the area a little bit, kind of what you get into. If you're coming into an area where there's potential food, power lines, for example, there's always black bears in the power lines. So if you're in that area, it never hurts to make a little noise and let the animals know that you're there. And then hopefully you're going to prevent that from happening, because it's possible if you're certainly out there picking blueberries or blackberries or something like that, and you're out there doing your thing, you could run face to face with a black bear. And so if you're making noise and kind of letting them know you're there, that's probably not going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, so making noise is a good.
Unless they like blueberries more than you do.
Yeah, I guess that's debatable depending on.
Yeah, right.
So what if a bear is following you, I guess, is the question, versus just kind of
following you?
Yeah, you get the sense that it's like, wait a minute, no, I didn't just startle it, but you're kind of getting the sense that it's following you.
Well, if a bear is following you, like as you're hiking or as you're walking, this is one of those situations where it's not good. It's bad.
Yeah.
Because that bear should not be following you. There's something going on with that thing. Like a lot of predators, if you run, sometimes they will chase you. So I guess the best piece of advice is just to try to walk briskly, to move briskly, and get away, as far away from it as you can. It's one of those situations where if something like that is going on with a wild animal like a bear that doesn't normally do that, it's not something they would normally do. If you're walking away, I'd start looking for something you could use as a weapon, potentially a big stick or a big rock or something like that, because things have kind of gone bad if that situation happens. And it might be certainly that it's just looking for food because it's used to being around people and it's been fed by people. But I would look for some sort of a stick or some kind of weapon in the event that you need to defend yourself with that stick or rock or whatever you can find. I mean, use what you can. But get away from it. Don't run. But I would just move away from it. It's one of those scenarios where things are bad. Things are not going the way they should go. So, yeah.
Bears are not friendly. It's not trying to be your friend.
No, they don't. Yeah, I mean, they don't want to. They don't want you. They don't want to be your pet. They're not there because they're there because either something's wrong with them. And they're a wild animal. They're a mammal. They're susceptible to diseases. They're susceptible. They can get rabies. They can get things that people can get or animals can get that can cause them to act funny or act different. And if that's the case, something's going on with that animal, and you need to get away from it as quickly as you can, without causing it to chase you. And then certainly report that if that's the case. If you're walking up a trail, and again, like that, it could be just as simple as it's been used to being fed, and it's just like looking for food. But get away from it and report it, because that's something we're going to have to deal with. We can't have a black bear hanging out in an area that's approaching people and trying to get food. So we would have, in that case, we would have to show up and potentially tranquilize it or trap it and relocate it or something like that.
Especially if you're on a trail that's not as well traveled, that isn't adjacent to homes and things like that.
Or I guess even if it is, it's something that we've
either
had
way,
several this year that have had. We had one in Winchester that broke into a house, and so once they start to get, like I said, habituated to humans, it just kind of gets worse. I mean, the old adage, a fed bear is a dead bear. It's true. Once you start feeding them, they just get you, and it's easy. I mean, why wouldn't you? I would, if I could go to people's houses and they'd feed me, then I'd probably just go randomly to people's houses. So it needs to be addressed, and unfortunately, sometimes we have to shoot them and kill them because there's no way to we just can't let that happen. We can't let animals that are potentially that dangerous just go up to people randomly.
Yeah, and it's probably important to point out that in these cases where this bear might be following you, it might be sick, but it might be stalking you. I mean, that's I mean, it's it's not being friendly. It's you might be dinner, like that.
Exactly right. If that, like I said, if that's happening, then the norm is kind of gone. What they know, because honestly, I've dealt with a lot of bears over the years. I've dealt with problem bears over the years. So it's not just the random bear. And 95% of the time, when you make noise or you do whatever, they'll take off. They might just, kind of not react because they've got food right there on them or in their vicinity and they're not running away. But 95% of the time, they're going to run away because they are inherently afraid of people. And so if it's coming after you, if it's coming toward you, it's not good. It's potentially stalking you, or it's potentially looking for a handout, which maybe it's not necessarily trying to eat you or kill you, but it could certainly lead to that. So always
a bad situation when a bear is following you.
Yes.
So another animal that I think is has a bad reputation for being ornery or bull moose, sometimes cows as well, but I think they don't always get the respect that they deserve for being as powerful as they are. So could you talk a little bit about how people should handle bull moose, especially in the woods or any moose? Sometimes people tend to think that they're just kind of tall horses, it seems, at least the way I see people interact with them. Or they almost want to go out of their way to interact with them, and it's not a good idea. But
it kind of baffles me the lack of respect for these animals, because and again I guess the problem with them is they kind of do look like a big horse, and in a lot of ways they will just kind of act like a horse, where they'll just sit there and look at you until they decide to turn and try to stomp you. And anybody. If nobody's seen a moose attack a person, I strongly recommend you go on YouTube and check that out, because it is a vicious, violent attack, and they will stomp you and they will potentially kill you. Probably the closest I've ever been to being killed in this job was by a moose. It was an injured moose that I was trying to deal with because it was injured. It had a broken back leg. The rear right leg was completely broken, but it still was able to close a lot of distance with me very quickly. Fortunately, I kind of had the foresight to put a tree in between him and I, and he hit that tree with a lot of force. So he was trying to hit me, trying to kill me, because I was trying to deal with unfortunately, I had to put him down, but I was trying to get him out of the neighborhood and get him into an area where I could put him down. Honestly, that's all the animals that I've dealt with. They are by far the most dangerous. And so can
you just remind people how the size of those animals? I mean, I think
they range in size certainly, but a yearling moose or young moose can weigh 300 or 400 pounds. Up to, you don't see them 1,000 pounds in this area typically, but you certainly, it's possible. They're typically 700 to 800 pounds, and so that's a significant animal that will, if it stomps on you, it could kill you easily, very easily. And they have killed people in the past. They say the bull moose during the rut is one of the most dangerous animals in the wild, because I guess part of it is that they seem so passive and they seem so just kind of nonchalant, where they'll just sit there and look at you until they decide to not look at you anymore, and they will close the distance very, very quickly. At that point, so people will see them and be like, "Oh, look at the moose! I want to feed him, or I want to pet him, or I want to do this." And that's when people get injured. So, you can watch them from afar. put something in between you. Don't try to go up to them. Don't try to pet them. Treat them with the respect they deserve. And they're really neat to see. They've got a face only a mother could love probably. But they're pretty cool critters, but you got to give them respect and give them that distance, because they will hurt you.
And they don't tend to budge either. So if you're walking along a trail and you see one, and it's in the trail.
Yep. If you weigh 1,000 pounds or more, then you can go ahead and walk over to them. But they've got the right of way. They're a big animal. So yeah, if you see something in the trail, they're not going to stay there. They're passing through. Just give them. Just stop. Give them time to pass through, and then you can go through. But don't even on a snow machine or an ATV. I've seen videos and stuff of people getting right up next to them on a snow machine. And you're still not safe. They can rear up and knock you right off. So, like I said, just give them the respect that they deserve, and keep a distance, and put something in between you if you can.
Yeah, those hooves can do some damage.
Oh yeah, they're brutal. They're brutal.
Yeah, people don't always appreciate the damage they can do. That's the one animal that scares me more than bears. I mean, I've only seen bears run in the other direction, but bull moose, when I see their tracks, I don't.
And bulls are very dangerous, but cows certainly with a calf, far more dangerous than a black bear with cubs. They will defend those calves violently. So yeah, you definitely want to give them respect.
So if you see a moose calf in the woods,
yep, they will come after you. I've seen some scenarios where they have seriously hurt people because people got too close to their calf. They'll like I said, they'll more so than a black bear. They will defend those. Because black bears, like the cubs, they can climb. The mother's used to kind of leaving them, and then if they come into a scenario where they're scared, they'll just shimmy up a tree and they'll shoot right up that tree in seconds. And the mother knows that they can get away usually. But a cow moose will defend her calves. That's for sure.
Do they tend to leave them like deer leave the fawn? I don't know as much.
Yeah, they will. They will. It seems like not as much, and certainly when they're young, they will, obviously, because they need to go out. And once they start to get to the point where they're they're big enough to kind of walk with them, they can usually keep up with them pretty well. So they'll stay right with them usually.
Okay. So if you do happen to be walking along a trail and you see a moose calf, or you do see a cow, and it's in the summer season, you probably want to.
Oh, for sure.
Back it up.
Absolutely.
Back out of there as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
And if you can't, just get to a tree, somehow put trees in between you as much as possible.
Yeah. Right. I think the safest thing with any one of those types of critters is like a deer or a moose or something like that. Like I said, it was a 6-inch hemlock tree that kind of saved my neck. So if you can, it doesn't. Obviously, the bigger the better. But if even a small tree, you could use that as to help shield you from what's potentially about to come.
Okay. So bottom line, respect moose, because they don't get the respect they deserve because they look kind of dopey and simple.
They do.
But
they definitely
they're not dopey and simple. They're dangerous.
They might be dopey and simple, but but they're powerful. They're very powerful.
That's true.
Yeah.
They can be all three at the same time.
Exactly.
So another animal that kind of gets minimal attention, but it does get some because people are afraid of snakes, are timber rattlers. So, in this part of the country, we don't get a lot of rattlesnakes, but that is one that we have. Is that one that folks should fear, or what are some of your thoughts on? Timber rattlers here?
Certainly not fear. I guess be cognizant. I've never seen one, and I've spent a lot of time in the woods. We have pockets of them. We have areas where they are that our agency knows where they are, but they don't release it because they are protected. They're a protected endangered species right now, and so, and most of that's because of habitat loss, because they're just building where their grounds typically were, and so there's not a lot of them, but certainly something to be cognizant of. And with rattlesnakes, whether it's timber or western diamondback or whatever, they're very good about letting you know when you're too close, and that goes back to those earbuds. If you're walking along, and I've actually, believe it or not, I was in Colorado, and I had a western diamondback that I was standing within 2 feet of, and I didn't see it, and it was rattling. I heard the rattle, and I jumped out of the way. As soon as I looked down and realized I was standing within 2 feet of a Western diamondback rattlesnake. So they're very good about letting you know that they're there. So, obviously try to be cognizant of where you are, like depending on where you are in the state, and then just the kind of the terrain. They tend to like that rocky areas where they can get in there and seek shelter, and then they go where the critters are. So, like I said, definitely it's something that you would want to be cognizant of. There's a couple of snakes, at least one, the milk snake, that will kind of mimic the rattlesnake and it'll rattle its tail. It won't rattle, but it'll shake its tail. And that's certainly, they trick a lot of people because we get a lot of calls about people finding rattlesnakes and they turn out to be milk snakes. But any one of those animals, any wild animal is something you got to be cognizant of, and they can be dangerous. But as a general rule, over the last 15 years, I've lived in New Hampshire pretty much all my life, and I've never seen a timber rattlesnake. And I've hunted and kind of fished and done all kinds of stuff outdoors. So I'd like to see one, but probably won't.
Bottom line, leave it alone if you see one, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Don't poke it.
Yep.
Don't poke it or try to pick it up or try to take a selfie with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, the majority of the times, and anybody who's like seen YouTube or whatever, when people get injured by animals, it's because they're doing something they were not supposed to do. It's pretty rare that someone's there minding their business or doing whatever they're supposed to do, and an animal just comes up and attacks them. It does happen, but it's more that people are messing with it and doing something they shouldn't have done. So, leave it alone.
And if you are hiking in some of those ledgy, rocky areas, you might see them. And some people wonder, well, why aren't they telling us where they are? Can you address what people wonder? Why don't they say where they are? So I would love to see one, or I don't ever want to see one and hike there.
Right. It's more just to kind of protect what we have left as a population, because there are people that would to go try to catch them. Believe it or not, there's a really, really big industry with reptiles that people like to collect them and have them as pets. And I think that they would try to catch them and try to take them essentially. And they're a protected species, and we're trying to save what little resources we have left with them. So I think that less people that know, and I think some people might do it in good faith, just trying to see them because it'd be cool to see a timber rattlesnake. But I think the more we can leave them alone, the better off they are as a species. So we just don't want people knowing where they are. I don't even know where they are.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I didn't know you didn't know where they are.
No, I know about where some of them are, like the towns, but I certainly don't know where. I couldn't go find them right now if I needed to. So they think I talk too much.
Yeah. All right. So that's why. For folks who are sort of wondering why they don't release that information, it's because they're trying to protect the species as much as possible. And as usual, we can't have nice things because people. People like to be stupid, like hooligans. So
believe it or not, there's a huge market for these things. Like if you take snakes that are native to the United States and send them to China, they can get a lot of money for these. They can get hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for these animals. And so, if you were down on your luck or unemployed or wanted some extra money, that's what happens. Anytime you put a price on an animal's head, that animal's going to suffer. And so that's what would happen. People would take turtles and seal turtle eggs and sell turtle eggs, and there's all kinds of black market, so to speak, or stuff that people don't either know about or don't care about, but it happens a lot, whether it's this state or this country or the state or other countries. So there's a huge market for it, and I honestly think people would try to take the snakes and either keep them as pets or sell them. If you could get $1,000 for a rare endangered timber rattlesnake, what do you have to lose? So
people would do it. People do all kinds of things.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're talking about potential, these animals that may be potentially dangerous. People like to bring, they think about deterrents, and bear spray is one of them, or firearms. And so in terms of bear spray, is that an actual deterrent in your experience? Are bears, do they mind the bear spray? Does it actually bother them, or is it just a slight annoyance?
No, bear spray works. It's one of those things that, bears, even though, they've got the same basic eye structure that we have, And most mammals kind of all have the same. So basically, the principle of it is you take something like a hot, because all pepper spray is pepper. It's hot pepper, and you take something and put it in somebody's mucous membranes or in their eyeballs, and it makes it very difficult to see. It burns, it hurts, and so essentially, in some cases you're going to make them angry, but they can't see. It basically takes it's a involuntary movement where your eyeballs shut and you cannot see because there's something burning in your eyes. There's no long-term effect from it. I mean, there's like a very, very small percentage of the human population that's allergic to peppers. Very, very small percentage of them. But other than that, if you're not allergic to it, it's really not going to have any detrimental long-term effect. So it can work. The only problem with that is in order to really deploy it effectively, you have to be pretty close. And so it kind of, last case scenario, I guess, I wouldn't want somebody to get some bear's pepper spray or whatever they call it, bear spray, and think, well, I can do what I want. I can go where I want. I can act like an idiot because I've got pepper spray. That's kind of a last case, worst case, last resort type scenario where if that bear's on top of you, I think there's like a 15-foot spray cone or whatever, but you got to hit them in their eyes from 15 feet. So essentially it's going to take that bear being right on top of you before you can spray it and effectively get it in the eyes. So again, great tool, great resource, but don't think just because I have pepper spray or bear spray, I can go in and, like that scenario where you see a bear, like, oh, I'm just going to bebop up the trail. I know it's hanging out there, but I've got pepper spray, so I'll just spray it if it bothers me. I wouldn't look at it that way. It's something that you can use as a worst, last resort, worst case scenario. I guess worst case scenario, you get eaten by a bear, but,
that would be the worst scenario.
Right.
So if you're talking about just having that momentary sort of closing their eyes, I mean, that's really what you're after. You're looking to escape because you're not looking to kick the bear's ass. I mean, that's never going to happen. I mean, you're just looking for that letting go and maybe giving you that opportunity.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah, it's gonna be that moment of surprise where their eyes slam shut and they don't really know what's going on or what to do, and that's when you hopefully are gonna be smart and get out of dodge while you can. I mean, typically with humans it lasts significantly more than a couple seconds. It's half an hour, 45 minutes. I've never sprayed a bear with pepper spray, so I don't know how long it lasts on them. But I wouldn't hang out to find out. I'm not gonna set my watch and see how long it takes them to get back and try to eat me.
Until he gets angry again.
Right. So I mean, definitely take that opportunity. Spray it and get out of dodge while the getting's good.
Okay. And firearms, we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next session. But if your main concern is wildlife versus people, are there specific firearms that you should think about carrying versus if your main concern is people? If you're
yes and no. I mean, I think that I guess that's. The type, I mean, if you're going to be out, effectively like a shotgun with double-aught buck is probably the best thing to use because you don't have to aim as well or as much, you know what I mean? It's like a spray pattern that you're probably I mean, ultimately, if you've got a bear that's charging you, and especially if you're not trained with a firearm that well, I mean, we train all the time, and I honestly think it would be a pretty difficult task to hit a bear that's running after me while all your adrenaline's pumping and all that stuff. So what would I want to use? I would shoot it I would like to have a 12 gauge with double-aught buck. That would be the best thing to use. Are you going to walk around in the woods with that? Probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
So if it, I guess it boils down to, stopping power versus accuracy. I mean, you could have the biggest hand cannon in the world, and if you can't hit anything with it, then it's really not going to do any good. So I guess whatever the best firearm to carry is something that you'll carry with you because it's not so big that it's uncomfortable to carry or whatever, and B, something that you can use effectively, something that you can actually hit what you're aiming at. Like I said, if you could have the biggest gun in the world, but if you don't hit anything, then, with a human being, you pull out a giant 44 Magnum with whatever, that's going to have some deterrence. That they're going to see that and be like, wow, that's a big gun. I'm going to run away. If a bear sees that, it just looks like a hunk of steel to them or whatever. They don't
whatever they think. Whatever they think.
So if it's, again, you could look at it like if it's for people, yeah, sure, have the biggest, shiniest, baddest looking gun you can find. But with a critter, they don't care. So whatever you can use effectively, whatever you're gonna carry with you, that's probably your best, defense.
Okay. And going back to sort of meshing with the situational awareness, when you're talking about being aware of your surroundings, this is when you kind of have to think about, all right, well, if I'm seeing a bear that is either following me, or maybe I'm in a situation where this bear is looking a little like maybe I need to start backing up, and this bear is paying attention to me rather than fleeing. Maybe I need to get the bear spray out of my bag, because what you're not going to be able to do is get that spray out of your bag and fight a bear at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think you talked about that a little bit, like I'm going to start looking for a stick, so if you have those things.
Yep. Yeah. You want to, I mean, if you're in that situation where this thing's following you, or it's raising an alarm enough for you to be like concerned about whatever it is, whether it's following you or however it's behaving. Yeah, absolutely. I would get that spray out, or get your firearm, or get your stick, or get your rock, or get whatever it is that you have, and get that ready, because when it does happen, it's going to happen very, very quickly, very quickly.
Because they can, I don't know what their speeds are, but it's
fast.
By the time you think
Faster
it's happening, it's
me.
already happened.
That's right. And remember, you don't have to be faster than a bear. You just have to be faster than the other person that you're with.
That's key.
Yeah.
Unless you're by yourself.
You're right. Exactly.
Then you're in trouble.
That's right.
All right. So, when talking about some of the injuries and rabies and things like that, one of the challenges when you're out and about is seeing an animal that isn't acting normal. What about a rabid animal, or an animal that, how would you recognize if an animal had rabies or isn't acting quite right?
Yeah. So with rabies, I mean, that's a great question. With rabies, there's a lot of kind of common misconceptions with rabies. People, they think that if an animal's out during the day, it has rabies. There's something wrong with it, which isn't true. I mean, animals will come out during the day. We really don't have any true nocturnal animals in the state other than bats. So all the other species, though they come out a lot, mostly at night, they'll come out during the day. If animals don't have the luxury of having a refrigerator or a grocery store. So if it's during the day and they're hungry, they'll come out and try to find something to eat. So that in itself doesn't mean anything, just because it's out during the day. But when you have an animal that's displaying unusual behavior, whether it's following you, or whether it's like ultra friendly, or whether it's whatever, obviously there's something wrong with it. There's some kind of an issue with this animal. Now that may be that it's been habituated to humans, or it may be that it's somebody had it as a pet and it escaped, or whatever. There's all kinds of variables that can come with that. So that's something that you need to kind of realize. And then, if like I said, if an animal is acting really strange, obviously if it's attacking you or trying to bite you, then there's something seriously wrong with this animal. But if it's just overly friendly, then something's going on and you should call and report that. Whether we'll be there, or whether it'll be there when we get there to deal with it is one thing, but who knows, but you got to do your due diligence and report that. So if it's acting aggressive and coming after you, you need to do what you can do to defend yourself or whoever you're with. And if that means, whacking it with a stick or a trekking pole or whatever that you have, or shooting that animal, then that's what you have to do to kind of defend yourself. But keep a safe distance. If you can get away from it, get away from it. Rabies is one of those things that I've dealt with a lot of animals that have rabies. And typically speaking, they will try to bite you, and that's their goal. They will just come after you aggressively and try to bite you. And so that's like rabies is one of the things that they're susceptible to. There's all kinds of different distempers. There's canine distemper, there's feline distemper. There's all these other sicknesses that it can be. So it may not be rabies, but obviously something's wrong with it. And when the animal's kind of, we get a lot of calls where an animal's, out and about during the day, or it's kind of doing whatever. And I'll usually say, well, what is it? Does it look like it's feeding, or does it look like it's kind of doing? And if they're like, yeah, it looks like it's out looking for whatever, then that's just hungry. It's just doing its thing. But if it's like laying down and it's curled up in a ball and it's just laying there sick, obviously something's wrong with it. I don't know what it is. Don't touch it. Don't try to be the hero. Don't save it, because ultimately, a lot of people kind of don't know this, but with rabies, if you get rabies, if you contract rabies and it reaches your brain, you're going to die. There's nothing they can do to save you. You have rabies, it's in your brain, you're going to die. If you get bit, it's treatable and all that stuff. But this is something that you definitely do not want to mess around with if you don't have to. And if it's something that you're doing to defend yourself, obviously deal with it, take care of it, call us, and then obviously go talk to your doctor and potentially get treated for if you're bitten by an animal. Definitely want to get treated.
Okay, so it is treatable, but you don't want to. But if you are, if the skin's broken or if you've been attacked by an animal, you got to get there soon. You don't want to just, oh, I'm fine, it'll be okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, if you
gotta be
careful. There are certain scenarios where they tend to err on the side of caution and they take it a little bit too far. I'm not public health. I'm not your doctor. I'm not going to tell you one way or another. But there's scenarios where, like, really, if you don't have any broken skin, if you don't get saliva, whatever, talk to your doctor, do whatever they tell you to do, but don't freak out thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die of rabies. But certainly if you get bit or in a situation where, you have a cut on your hand or something like that and you get saliva or blood, then you don't ignore it. Because you're going to die from it, definitely, from rabies.
And it's important to say that this is for mammals. I mean, birds, rabies.
Right.
So if birds are acting strange, that's a different situation.
Birds are strange anyway, so
that's why we love them.
Yeah,
for some of us. But that's a different phone call, or whatever. But that's not going to be rabies.
Correct.
And that's not going to cross over. So there's no way to deter an animal with rabies. I mean, it's a brain.
Yeah, no. I mean, if it's rabid, if it has rabies and it's coming after you, you can't. You're not. I mean, you could run, I guess. If you're faster than it is, then great. But you're probably. Like I said, I've dealt with rabid animals over the years, and they, I like to kind of compare them to a zombie, even though there's not really such thing as a zombie. But from all the movies we've all seen, they just bite and they bite and they try to. I was in what's it called? Agway recently, a couple weeks ago, and there was a rabid raccoon in Agway. It went in, walked right in the store, attacked a dog. As soon as it saw me, it came after me. It wanted to attack me. So that's kind of the telltale sign of rabies. And if that happens, you have to just stop this thing. You're not going to run away from it. You shouldn't run away from it. You should try to definitely do something to stop it from consuming oxygen.
If you can dispatch it.
If you can,
and in those cases, you may not be able to wait for a Fish and Game officer to come dispatch it for you.
And then if you do end up, having to dispatch it, just leave it, and we'll come deal with it.
Okay, but it's still worth a phone call to let you guys know.
Make the phone call, but don't pick it up. Don't try to mess around with it unless if you've got gloves and all that stuff, you kind of know what you're doing. That's one thing. But I've had a lot of scenarios where people have been exposed to rabies or potential rabid animals for no reason. Just it shouldn't happen. Just don't pick it up and play with it just because.
Okay. And so a lot of other diseases and illnesses that animals can suffer from that you might, so if you see an animal that might be kind of like moose, for example, I don't know how often brainworm, you might see that here. I don't know how common that is.
It used to be very common. The moose population is pretty much non-existent at this point down here. I mean, I shouldn't say that. All over the state, but there's nowhere near the moose now that there used to be. So brainworm used to be, when I first started this job 15 years ago, it was pretty common. I'd get a couple every year of brainworm moose, but I honestly haven't had one in probably 3 or 4 years that I've had to deal with. So I think it's hopefully the one good thing about the moose population on the decline is hopefully things like brainworm and winter ticks eventually will cease to exist. But who knows?
Mm-hmm. And so, the last piece I wanted to ask about was around, what to do, because one of the questions that people often have, or, what do I do when animals what do I do when I find a sick or injured animal? But I think before I ask that, one of the questions is how to determine whether an animal even needs help in the first place. Because especially this time of year in the summer, one of the things that, for all the hooligans and dumbos out there, a lot of people have a really good heart and they mean well, and they're just trying to help. But unfortunately, helping can turn into creating a problem that didn't exist. And so before someone's seeing, scoops up that fawn or that nest of bunnies or the baby birds. Can you clarify for folks what animals maybe don't need help or aren't as orphaned or left behind as they may think before they're trying to save them?
Yeah, ultimately, so I guess my perspective is looking at this is a couple things. Is one, there's animals, like you said, nature doesn't need us. We don't need to be there to help nature along. It's going to do fine, just fine without us. It'll probably do much better without us. So sometimes people get involved when they really kind of shouldn't. In some scenarios, if you have an animal that's been attacked by another animal, that's nature at its finest. I mean, that is, it's unfortunately, it's cruel. It seems cruel, but it's harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Nature is a hard place to the wild is a hard place to live, and it can seem cruel, but that's nature. I mean, that's how things happen. That's natural selection. That's how the food chain works. So sometimes people try to get involved with that and help out, and they really shouldn't. I mean, let things unfold the way they're supposed to unfold. When it comes to fawns, 99%, 95% of the time with fawns, people will pick them up or they'll find them and they'll call, and they really shouldn't have, because the mother will leave them to go feed, and then she'll come back and she'll come get them. And so that's usually the case. Occasionally we'll have one where a doe was hit and killed, and usually, so if I get a call about a fawn, usually what I'll do is I will contact the dispatch center, wherever it is, say, have you guys had any reports of does getting hit by, or deer getting hit by cars in this area? And a lot of times if they have, they'll say, yeah, we had one hit yesterday or 2 days ago. And so that the mother's dead, the fawn needs help at that point. But it's really not up to people to decide whether that thing needs help, because usually it does not need help. So just leave it alone, and make a phone call and say, listen, there's a fawn wherever. And typically what I'll do is if I can get there, if I can get to it, I'll give it time. I'll give it, a couple hours, sometimes a day, and go back there. And usually it's gone. Usually the fawn's gone. And then the other times that people pick them up, they'll take them home with them, trying to do the right thing. And I'll tell them to bring them back, put them back where you found them, and then we go back and check on them, and they're gone. And so majority of the time, it's mother just off feeding, and basically you're kidnapping their babies. So don't kidnap people, okay? Kidnap animals.
Don't be a kidnapper.
Yeah, don't be a kidnapper. And then with other animals, I like to say leave them alone and let nature do its thing. But I've been involved with rescuing animals, some animals, because some, it's like you hate to see them suffer, you hate to see them whatever. So, I mean, we have rehabbers, we have wildlife rehabilitators that we use. They're more than willing to go out, and they're more than willing to kind of deal with these animals. And they're trained. They know what they're doing. They know how to. There's a lot, like raccoons, for example. They carry a lot of diseases that people can get. That are just nasty, nasty diseases that humans can contract. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're risking getting yourself sick, but you're also risking exposing everybody else to it. Because you take like a baby raccoon, for example. If you're not doing things the right way and washing your hands, you let people handle them because they're cute. I mean, they are cute, but it's not our place to try to save these things. And by doing so, you're going to be risking injuring yourself or getting yourself sick and other people. So make a phone call if you can. That's kind of part of that's a big part of what we do in some areas. And we're going to let us kind of deal with them and let us, decide whether it should. Because a lot of times if we get called to something that I don't think can be rehabilitated, I'll dispatch it. I'm not going to let it just sit there and suffer. I'll take care of it. And like you said, people have big hearts and they want to help, but more often than not, they're doing more harm than they are good. So leave them alone. Leave the animals alone. And call us if you think there's something that can be done about it, but don't try to do it yourself.
Yeah. Especially those baby animals, because chances are they've got a much better chance of just staying with their parents than they do hanging out with us.
In some cases, that does there's plenty of, you can contact Deb Godey at Winchester Wildlife, and she has oftentimes tons and tons of wild baby animals that she rescues. So I can't say don't ever do it, but more often than not, unless it's some kind of extreme situation, just it's probably it's the mother's probably coming back, the parents are probably coming back. So
so keep an eye on it.
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
think it's you think the parents really have abandoned it, especially fledglings, baby birds, they look gangly and uncoordinated, because they are.
Exactly.
And a lot of baby birds die their first, that first year is rough on
Yes.
that.
Yeah. That's nature. I mean, honestly, if the way that things work in balance is, things die, and some animals will have a ton of babies, knowing that most of them are going to die. Only one or two are going to survive, or whatever. And if you start to try to change that, you start to disrupt the way things should be. That's how we get overpopulations, or you kill off the predators, or whatever. You do these things that we don't have a right. We don't understand. Even as smart as we've gotten over the years, or as dumb as we've gotten over the years, we think we know best. Well, we don't. We don't know what nature's really intentions are, and what's going on. And we try to stick our noses in it, and it really doesn't belong there. We need to let nature be nature and do its thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the last question. Then, and so do you want to talk a little bit about some of your projects, or one of your the projects going on next?
Big project, yeah.
Big, giant one.
Being involved with Fish and Game, and I've been doing this for a number of years, 15 years now. I'm getting at the point now in my career where I'm going to soon to retire. I'm scheduled hopefully to retire next year. So with that, and being part of the show Northwoods Law, some of the producer of the show has kind of shown some interest in what my plan is, and so my plan is to basically sail the world. In a nutshell, I want to sail the world.
That's the easy version. That's
I mean, it's obviously it's pretty
version.
elaborate. It's something that it's kind of the plans that are in the works right now, and it's going to be a pretty good adventure. And I've been approached, like I said, by the producer, and they want to hopefully do a television show about that. And so, kind of, we're in the early stages of kind of figuring that out and figuring out the ins and outs and how that's going to work. So, right now we're trying to kind of develop a brand, I guess is what you'd call it. But Salt of the Earth is kind of what the boat's name is going to be, and we're going to try to start doing some YouTube stuff and kind of getting some, what little fan base I have, so to speak, with the show, and people interested. Hopefully they can follow us, through this, and start crossing over from the Northwoods Law show to hopefully this, I don't know what the show would be called, if it's going to be called Salt of the Earth or whatever, but hopefully they'll follow us through that and continue watching the adventures we're going to have. It's going to be a little bit of everything: hunting, fishing, sailing, a little bit of everything. So that's kind of the big project, and going to try to do some YouTube videos and kind of get that ball rolling with that. So it's a lot. It's a big. The big plan. It's going to be something big, but I guess that's the next stage of life, and we'll see what it brings.
So when you say around the world, do you already know your stops, or kind of how your route, or have you not gotten to that point yet?
I mean, I kind of tentatively know in my head. I want to start out hopefully low key, as far as I don't want to just get in a boat and just go head South Pacific, because it's a big ocean out there. And honestly, I have zero experience sailing. I've been on a sailboat once, and the boat caught on fire when I was on it. So
that's a good start.
And so I'm hoping to learn to sail and kind of. So I'm thinking about like starting out in the Keys and the Bahamas and kind of working that area, and then once I start getting a little braver, we'll start to go elsewhere, go through the Panama Canal and go into the Pacific Ocean, and hopefully go up to Alaska, do some hunting and fishing up in Alaska. So the show hopefully is going to be a pretty big mix of, like I said, boating, sailing, hunting, fishing, just generally just kind of exploring, because it's a big world out there, and I've lived a pretty limited experience with that world. I've pretty much been in New England my whole life, and as much as I love it, I'm ready to see other parts of the world. So so it's I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we don't die in a fiery crash and sink the ship. But who knows? Yeah,
well, it'll be on film at least.
Yeah, it'll be filmed.
It'll be
forever remembered, I guess.
That's right.
The tragedy of 2019.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah,
I hope so. It should be fun. Yeah.
Some people think I'm crazy, and some people think it's the coolest thing in the world. So
I'm with the latter crowd. I mean, why not? I mean, it's out there. Might as well. take it and do it.
Yep. Do it while you can. Life's short.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks so much, Eric. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I think we're going to see you again for the carry or not to carry, and we'll work out the date for that. But for now, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and for everyone who watched, thank you very much. And we'll see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.